One of the great things about watching a lot of older anime is that at some point you're bound to come across a series or a movie that makes you wonder, why isn't this considered a classic? And you realise that there genuinely are still so many quote-unquote hidden gems out there to be discovered and brought to the attention of a wider public for more people to enjoy. And it makes you reconsider your understanding of anime history, why we think of particular works as classics and why other works have been forgotten, despite holding just as significant a position in the development of the medium. And that's the case for the first series I want to talk about today. I'm a big fan of early Tatsunoko Productions anime like Gatchaman, Hurricane Polymar, Gashern, but my favourite of these is probably Kurenai Sanshirou, or Judo Boy as it's known in English. This 26 episode series follows the titular Sanshirou as he goes on a quest for revenge after his father is killed by a mysterious one-eyed man. So Sanshirou travels the world in search of the man who killed his father in order to reassert the supremacy of the Kurenai style of martial arts. He basically goes wherever he hears of the presence of a one-eyed man, which means that we meet a whole lot of one-eyed dudes or guys with eye patches in this series. One of the common features of a lot of pulp stories and adventure serials is the endless curiosity and fascination with foreign, exotic cultures. This is the root of the kind of pulp adventure stories that something like Indiana Jones was based on. Because to fill the pages of their stories, pulp writers from the early 20th century would draw from any noteworthy or topical source they could find. And of course this was a time of nascent globalization, mass media, scientific development, and of course a healthy dose of imperialism. So you get stories about evil scientists, remnants of ancient civilizations, and of course racial stereotypes, all building on the curiosities and anxieties of the popular imagination of the time. And the reason I bring this up is that in some ways, Kurenai Sanshirou is the ultimate pulp story. It's a series that basically provides a tour of all of these different cultures and worlds and genres as they exist in the pulp imagination. The Western pulp imagination, really, but told from a Japanese perspective, represented in the Kurenai style of jujitsu, which goes up against every other fighting style or evil force in the world in search of the one that was able to defeat it. As with most revenge tales out there, the episodic stories of Kurenai Sanshirou often revolve around the violence and loss of humanity that comes with this quest for vengeance, with the main character often having to choose between the path of violence and the path of peace, usually represented in the female characters Sanshirou encounters. And one of this anime's greatest qualities is its ability to express this inner tension artistically, with a clash of visuals that are at times brutal and sharp and quick, and at others slow and gentle and contemplative. As you can see, Judo Boy's narrative eclecticism also extends to its visual style. The series was directed by Tatsunoko Pro co-founder Ippei Kuri, and his overall vision for the series, combined with Eiji Tanaka's art direction, remains consistently ambitious and innovative throughout the whole anime. And if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend reading this Animatudes article I'll link to in the description, which goes into great detail about the show's production and places it into the context of Tatsunoko Pro's history.
風の流れもない。お前は死ぬのだ。死ぬのだ。死ぬのだ。本物は一つ。バーン！うわサンダリアは永遠に滅びない。
Toshio Hirata is probably not a director most Western anime fans are familiar with. He mostly worked on children's shows, but he did direct one of my favourite OVAs, Bobby's Girl, which I would highly recommend you go watch, but the thing is, Bobby's Girl is very short and sort of minimalistic, and I think it's best experienced not really knowing anything about the story, so that's not actually the Toshio Hirata anime I want to talk about today. Instead, I want to talk about Kin no Tori, which is an adaptation of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale The Golden Bird. During my time as an avid, obscure anime researcher, I've noticed that over the years the anime industry has produced quite a few anthology series adapting various fairy tales and classic folk stories, and Toshio Hirata has worked as an episode director on a few of these anthologies, like Folktales from Japan and Manga Sekai Mukashi Banashi, which he worked on a few years before directing the standalone fairy tale adaptation Grim Doa Kin no Tori. Animated at Madhouse and released by Toei 3 years after its completion for some reason as part of their yearly cartoon festival. And for a while this film was thought to possibly be a lost masterpiece of sorts, and while it is no longer lost, it is a bit of a masterpiece, I must say. It's only 52 minutes long, but Kin no Tori is jam-packed full of colourful backgrounds and endlessly creative character animation. Manabu Ohashi, who was also animation director on that Bobby's Girl OVA I mentioned earlier, served as character designer and animation director on this film, and his work is truly incredible. What really stands out to me is the distinct visual identity of each of the locations the main characters traverse on their journey. And while the backgrounds are incredible, the character animation is also consistently delightful and dynamic. I particularly love this giant pink bird who needs to get drunk before he can fly. And there's even a great musical number, so yeah, there's no way you won't enjoy this movie, just go watch it. Maho Tsukai ni Taisetsu na Koto Natsu no Sora, or as I'll be referring to it, Some Days Dreamers 2, Sora, is a spin-off sequel series to the original Some Days Dreamers anime, both adapted from the manga series of the same name. It's a slice-of-life story that follows the titular Sora, a talented young mage who moves to Tokyo for a magic internship, where she attends classes and goes on various little missions under the tutelage of an older mage. We see her developing relationships with her fellow apprentice mages, as well as more episodic stories where Sora uses her magic to help various people in Tokyo. Now, the reason why I'm talking specifically about the spin-off rather than the original series is because it tells a completely different story, set in the same world but following a different protagonist, and it was also adapted by a different studio, a different crew, and has a completely different visual style, one that's quite unique to say the least. This series was directed and storyboarded by Osamu Kobayashi, who's worked on a few things here and there but is probably best known for directing the Beck anime adaptation and also that episode of Gurren Lagann that everybody thinks looks like shit. You may have already noticed from the clips I'm showing that this anime has a pretty peculiar aesthetic. We have these hyper-realistic backgrounds, most of which are literally just filtered photographs, to the point where at times this almost feels like a straight-up live-action animation hybrid series, where these rather simplistic character designs have just been drawn onto these real locations. But far from feeling lazy, this actually contributes to the show's mellow, relaxing atmosphere and creates this tangible sense of place. The anime is at its best when just sort of meandering through these locations. I mean, the series is really all about Tokyo. Although that being said, I do particularly like the first episode, which is set in Sora's hometown in Hokkaido before she moves to the city. But the show's ability to capture that youthful feeling of exploration and discovery, moving away from home for the first time and learning all these valuable lessons and coming of age, is what makes this show really worthwhile. Even among the crowded landscape of Iyashike anime, this is a very unique series that you can just throw on whenever you're in the mood for a chill, relaxing audiovisual experience, with a bit of teen romance sprinkled in. Following in the spirit of contemplative, romantic anime, let's talk about a little show called Sentimental Journey. This series is a bit of an outlier in the anime landscape, as it's an anthology series where every episode was written and directed by the same two people. Kazuyoshi Katayama, who directed and outlined the series, and Naruhisa Arakawa, who wrote the individual scripts. And as such, the episodes aren't really as hit or miss as they can often be in anthologies like this. Chances are, if you like the general vibe and storytelling of one episode, you'll probably like most of them, because there's clearly a coherent stylistic vision. Obviously, the overarching theme here is love, but these stories aren't really love stories. Most of the episodes deal with a certain ambivalence towards the concept. The characters often start off from a point of cynicism. And interestingly, not to spoil the whole thing, but rarely do these stories actually conclude with a romantic resolution, but rather usually a newfound appreciation or acceptance of the possibility of love. These are stories about characters gaining a new understanding of love. But what's really fascinating about this series is that it's actually an adaptation of a dating sim game, Sentimental Graffiti. So each episode of the anime actually tells the story of each of the potential love interests from the game, but the male protagonist is completely absent. All of these stories are about a girl who at some point was in some kind of relationship with or had feelings for a boy who then later moved away. This boy always appears in flashbacks, but we never really see his face, and it seems unlikely that this is the same guy in all of these girls' lives. So really, the anime just takes all of the characters from the game and tells their stories from their point of view, completely erasing the central male protagonist of the dating sim. And what we're left with are these melancholy character studies all about longing and memory. That's what makes Sentimental Journey one of the most unique and interesting romance anime ever made. And while I suspect this video won't be out before Valentine's Day, if you're in the mood for kind of sad but oftentimes uplifting little romantic tales, I highly recommend checking out Sentimental Journey.
ありがとう。頑張るね。